Good evening. My name is Vignesh Ramdas, and I am this year's chairman of the VIP Distinguished Speaker Series. This program is one of many put on by the Undergraduate Business Council as part of the Macomb School of Business. Today we are joined by Dean David Platt, Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs at the Macomb School of Business, as well as Keat Wilkins, co-founder and CEO of Sense Corp. We'll begin tonight with a conversation between Dean Platt and Mr. Wilkins, then we will open the floor to Q&A from the audience. After growing up in Big Spring, Texas, Keat Wilkins earned his BBA and MBA degrees from the University of Texas at Austin, and after graduating, Mr. Wilkins rose through the ranks of Citi and Mallinckrodt Pharmaceuticals, and after hiring and managing consultants as an executive at these companies, Mr. Wilkins believed that consulting could be different and better. This passion for creating a new brand of management consulting led him to co-found Sense Corp in 1996 with 3 colleagues here in the Lone Star State. Today, Sense Corp employs over 120 consultants, and after talking about 175, and earns over $20 million in annual revenues. However, if you were asked Mr. Wilkins the 2 things he's most proud of, he would say guaranteeing the success of his clients and creating a culture that attracts and retains the brightest people. The numbers tell the story. Most of Sense Corp's business comes from repeat clients and referrals, and consultant retention is off the charts, with all of Sense Corp's leadership remaining dedicated for over 10 years. To top it all off, Sense Corp has been recognized as one of the best places to work for an unprecedented 8 years in a row. Currently, Mr. Wilkins lives in St. Louis, where his interests are building cars, riding motorcycles, cooking, and biking, and he works with numerous nonprofits, including College Bound, Recipe for Success, Active Life, Texas 4000 for Cancer, and the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater St. Louis. Now that you've heard a little bit more about the speaker, let's get started. And as a reminder, today's event will end promptly at 6:30 p.m., and we would greatly appreciate if you guys could refrain from leaving early or using electronic devices. Well, without further ado, please help me introduce Dean Platt and Keat Wilkins.
Thank you, Vignesh. Welcome.
Thank
really
you.
glad to have you here.
It's good to be here.
Yeah, and thank you all for coming. It's a real pleasure to have such esteemed speakers and have people come to hear them.
And apparently you're locked in the room and can't use your phone.
That's right. You can't get out. So I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Feel free to go off in tangents if you like to, but we'd like to start by hearing about how you got started. What was your first job?
My first job out of school was with Citibank. I graduated with an MBA from Macomb's and interviewed all over the place, wanted something that was investment banking-like, and ended up with Citibank in the mortgage division. Moved to St. Louis and worked there for several years. I was one of those guys who was hired into this hotshot management development program, or so I thought.
Yeah.
And in my working career, we've had a couple of mortgage crises. And one of them hit about 3 years after I started work at Citibank. And we felt bad for all the people that were going to be laid off. And then we were all laid off, which was interesting. And it was probably one of the best things in my career that happened. It really helps one center on what you enjoy and what you like.
You hear that a lot.
Yeah,
People say,
it was very beneficial.
Something bad happened, but it turns out it was the best thing that ever happened.
In the moment, it kind of sucked. Give it a few months.
Yeah. And then what after that?
Then I went to work for Mallinckrodt medical manufacturing company, and worked there for another several years. I was in market research, and my job there was helping support mergers and acquisitions. So again, real business schooly thing to do, using my degree. I felt pretty good about it. And slowly over time, as part of supporting mergers and acquisitions, I developed a database full of competitive information. And that led me to begin to understand how to manipulate that data, store that data, cleanse that data. And before I knew it, I looked up and I was in the IT department and had a lot of technical skills, and found that it was a unique marriage between understanding what a business does and understanding how to translate technology in such a way that the business can use. And ultimately, that is the genesis of SenseCorp. I was the client and hired consultants year over year. They helped me manage my database, they helped me with a variety of projects, and felt through that experience that you could actually do it a little better, a little less by the large numbers of people coming in with lacking experience, but you could come in and give great careers and focus on what the client needs, give them what they need, and hopefully turn that into a successful business.
Interesting. As you were coming up in the more corporate environment, what do you think set you apart from other people that you were competing against, if anything?
My impatience.
Oh, really?
I was very impatient as a young graduate, actually. I remember shortly after going to Citibank, I wasn't there very long, it was probably about 6 months, and I went into my boss's office and explained to him in some lengthy detail about how my talents were being wasted. And I was out there toiling away on something I didn't even understand how it fit in with anybody's.
Do you recommend that as a career strategy to these
Well, yeah. So I told my boss that I really needed to focus on strategy. Now think about it. It's a worldwide bank, right? And I'm telling my boss that as a fresh graduate, I need to be focused more squarely on the strategy of this worldwide bank. And he just stared at me for a few seconds and he goes, "Shut the door on your way out." That was it. We later became great friends, and we're still friends to this day. But he spun that around on me and helped me understand, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so you need to be patient.
So you've started this company. How do you succeed at that? Because it's very different from what you were doing before.
How do you succeed in consulting? Well, first of all, we focus on building a culture that is reliant upon all the people that I work with. I mean, my success is nothing more than trying to help pick and retain the right people and enable them to do what they do. Because all of the magic is, as you can imagine, I at this point with 175 people, I find myself in a consulting situation very seldom. And so the success of SenseCorp really is dictated by the folks that I work with and the degree to which we're able to hear what they need to, one, deliver to the client, and two, remain happy employees, really.
I've seen a lot of people over the years who were great at working on that database that you worked on or something, but then when they made the transition to being a manager, they couldn't make the jump because it's different skills. What would you say sets apart people who make that jump from those who can't?
A good question, what sets them apart? I know when we recruit, we're looking for very smart people that understand how to problem solve and communicate well. And that communication is not just being able to put together the right words in the right moment. Sometimes it's not putting together the right words. Sometimes it's just being able to listen, being able to hear what somebody's saying and articulate it back to them. We've been very fortunate at SenseCorp that people see what we're trying to do and how we're doing it, and we've been able to attract the right people that thrive on that.
That's good.
We've been real lucky.
When you were at UT, what do you remember about your experiences here?
Well, I remember we were just chatting. I remember many of my professors, and I still try to talk to them as often as I can. Because there was a question that said, "What do you remember most about UT?" And they forwarded that to me, and I was thinking, and it's all the things you do remember, the football games and the classes. I had a semester that I barely remember.
Do I dare ask?
I was lucky to be in school the next semester. My GPA that semester started with a 0.0. Yeah. So it's more what I don't remember, I think, that set me apart that year.
Oh, we're setting a great example for the crowd here, yeah?
I got real serious right after that. And I don't think I made any B's ever again.
Well, that's good. You made it out anyway.
I did.
One way or another.
I did. And it served me well.
What class do you remember the most from your time here? I almost hate to ask.
Well, so my undergraduate degree was in finance. And so I remember a couple of my finance professors quite vividly. Jim Nolan was one of them, and Keith Brown was another, both of whom I was asking about earlier. And then my MBA was concentrated in marketing, and Lee McAllister was instrumental in that, as was Herb Miller, who, if you knew him, he was just here.
Just walk through, and all four of them are still here. That's good.
It's funny, because I thought they were old teachers when I was here. Apparently, when I was here, all the professors were about 20.
They just seemed old at the time. They can't get us to leave.
Why would you,
That's
right?
Yeah, exactly.
This is a slice of heaven.
Yeah. Who do you admire the most?
Oh, that's a tough one. Because it's contextually needs to be, enriching. From a business perspective, from an entrepreneurial perspective, I'm pretty high on a couple of guys. I was high on Steve Jobs. I thought that he was amazing in his relentless drive for perfection and the purity of the design he wanted to apply to things. I'm also a big fan of Herb Kelleher from Southwest Airlines. I think they both demonstrate the ability to view a certain circumstance and not be limited by that landscape right in front of them, but envision what could be. And then kind of along those same lines, I'm a big fan of Malcolm Gladwell, who always makes me think in a way that I hadn't thought of before.
Yeah. The 10,000 hours and the tipping point
That's right.
and all those
That's
things.
right.
Yeah.
Exactly right.
Very interesting.
I was a big Jack Welch fan as I was coming up.
Okay. How about on a more personal level? Has anybody inspired you with their example, how to live a life?
Oh yeah. Well, there's always a number of people close to you. Right? Your dad or your family or a priest or somebody. And I've got a number of those people. In line with that one semester, I had some high school years where I needed bumper rails. It was like bumper bowling, right? And I was the ball bouncing off, and if it hadn't been for some of these very influential adults, I wouldn't have been here.
Have you ever failed at something? And are you willing? If you're willing to share it, what did you learn from it?
Oh gosh.
Aside from that one semester.
That turned out pretty good. I failed at many things. I initially failed at finding the right jobs. I was telling the group this earlier. I didn't really understand the right fit. And so I would interview for jobs and they would tell me you're not the right fit. And I didn't understand enough about myself. I understood what their job was, but I didn't understand myself enough to understand what that right fit meant. And so at SenseCorp, we spent a lot of time as we're recruiting people trying to help them understand what that fit is or isn't. Any given time, I think we fail at SenseCorp on a routine basis. We've put into place what we call our learning organization, and it only really works if you're willing to risk the failures. And generally speaking, the people I work with are very bright, they're very energetic, and they only take big risks if we're all in it together. So I end up owning the failures a lot of the times.
How do you define what SenseCorp will and won't do? Are there boundaries that you work with?
That's a fascinating question. SenseCorp is a consulting firm, right? We're a management consulting company. And at any given time, you look around and you realize you're generating a lot of intellectual property. And so there's always the desire to understand how to capitalize that intellectual property. And so when and where and how do you productize that? Because that's a whole different game in terms of margin, right? A consultant has a certain number of hours they can work, they have a certain hourly rate, and that's that. If you had an IP that you could sell, then suddenly you can sell it with no incremental cost. It becomes pure profit. And we've bumped up against that several times in the past, and it's not been successful for us. We seem to always come back to the fact that we are really great consultants. We're really great at helping our clients look at the chaos, figure out what needs to change, and helping them get from point A to B to C to D.
How does not really on our prepared questions, but how does a new consultant deal with that chaos? Because that's got to be a hard thing for a new employee to make sense out of.
I think it is. I think it is. I don't know how they deal with it. I know how we try to prepare them for it.
Yeah.
And I'm looking back, yes, I'm sorry, but there's a couple of them in the audience back there, and they could tell you how they deal with it. Consulting by its very nature puts one in a situation that you are the voice of expertise. Whether you are clearly the expert, whether you've done it 1,000 times, one time, or you only understand the approach by which to get to the answer. That's part of being the expert. That creates a lot of uncertainty in one's career. Yeah. And so we spend a lot of time up front after we hire somebody helping enculturate them into what does it mean to consult? What does it mean to have that ambiguity? How do you deal with that? How do you push through that? And on what support structures do you lean? I think consulting is fabulous. I think it's a great job. If one's looking for though tightly structured work, it's not necessarily the place to be.
Yeah, that's right.
It's a new challenge every day.
How has Sense Corp evolved over the time? I mean, I'm sure it's a different company, not just in revenues and number of employees, but I'm sure it's a very different company now than, well, even 5 years ago. But over the life of the company, how's it changed?
In some ways, we're very similar, and in some ways, we're very different. When we started, it's about 20 years ago, and that was, heck, some of you weren't even born probably. It was before the internet was prevalent. And when we began, we were purely a technology consulting firm. And that has a certain edge that you've got to keep on. And it's very difficult to second guess or predict rather, what that next technology is going to be and how are you going to be the expert in that technology. For a while, you can be an expert in a given technology, and then we all know what happens. That technology becomes the old technology, and it's replaced with the next technology. And so what we've had to do is be able to craft a definition of our firm in such a way that it allows us to really have the best of both worlds. And so we used to be a data warehousing consulting firm, and now we are a management consulting firm. And guess what? We do a lot of data warehousing. We do, but our value and our differentiation is being able to offer an end-to-end solution, all the way from strategy, all the way to technologies. Yeah. And about half or 60% of our work does involve a serious piece of technology. To where right now we just kicked off a project this week for a big car company, and it's a mobile app. We're actually building a mobile app for a rental fleet, which is pretty exciting.
Yeah. Interesting. So as you've managed this change and this constant updating of the company, what principles do you fall back on as a CEO, as a leader?
Well, we talk about running Sense Corp in such a fashion that we help our clients' journey, we improve the lives of our employees, and we leave the world a better place. And I'm the first one to say those are pie in the sky kind of ideals. But we talk about them internally and acknowledge that if you don't say it, if you don't at least think that that's what you're after, you're not even going to move in that direction. Yeah. And so on a regular basis, that's what we're trying to do, is understand, are we delivering to the clients what they need? Are we giving our employees a great experience? If those two things happen, chances are we're going to make a profit. That last part's always the trick. But it seems to work pretty well.
Yeah. So it's on the employee piece of that, I know you use something called an employee compass, I believe.
We do.
To talk about 4 dimensions. You want to talk a little about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, SenseCorp has, as many companies will say, a very unique culture. And the fact that we focus so squarely on making sure that as a consulting lifestyle, we're making the right trade-offs and bringing a great career, that all by itself makes us unique. And then you add onto that the fact that we really strive with inordinate energy to deliver to the client what they need. That makes us doubly unique. And the things that we think bring us that power, if you will, is our compass. When we talk about working at SenseCorp as a journey, like any journey, you've got a compass, so we've got a little metaphor, and the 4 points of our compass are brilliant, creative, human, and fun. That's what we are. If you had to sum it up, that's what we are at SenseCorp. And any given firm, any given company, any given place you'd look can maximize on one or even two. It's really, really difficult as a company to maximize on all 4 of those simultaneously while delivering value to the client, and hopefully on budget, on time. And it really sets us apart. Yeah. And we fall back to that often. It's part of every new hire class that we bring in. The compass and the metaphor and talking about it is a very rich part of what we do.
So you talked earlier about the challenge of profitability, the challenge to attain and sustain profitability as you're transforming the company. How does corporate social responsibility fit in with that? Because is it consistent with profitability? Is it a challenge on profitability? And how do you maintain a company culture that promotes that? Or do you?
Yeah, that's a good question. As you look around at any event you go to, there's corporate sponsorship, right? And you could say that that's that corporation being responsible to society, if you will. It's interesting. I was on a plane flying down to a recruiting event here, and I was reading a HBR article, and it was challenging the reader to really examine your business and ask the question, do you walk your walk? And so I'm on the plane, I'm on Southwest Airlines, and I'm running through my head an inventory of the things that are important to SenseCorp. What do we say is important? What is the value? And I have always believed that the corporate entity has a social responsibility. It is its own individual. I work for it, we all work for it, but it has a responsibility to the community beyond just paying us, beyond just delivering what the client needs. Yeah. And so for us, for me personally, I have a penchant for nonprofit activities. As an executive, they help me. They help put me into situations that challenge me differently, and there's a whole variety of reasons. But I got to thinking about it. I thought, we may or may not be walking that walk exactly right. So I got off the plane, and I spoke to a group of recruits, about this big, and I told them about the new training program that we had that included a 1-month not-for-profit project at the end of your training program. Now, I just made it up. And I got done speaking, and all the employees that were there ran up to me afterwards and said, what are you talking about, and how are we going to do that? And my response was, I don't know, but that's what we need to do. And it's been really fascinating because that moment has paid off to our corporation in the most enriching ways. When we talk about people your guys' age, right? It's fascinating. A lot of people want to lament where young people are or where they're not. There's a variety of views on that. One of the things I have found is that you guys holistically understand the role that you have in the community, and you look forward to giving back to that community in very real ways. Being able to walk that walk, being able to demonstrate that value set as a corporation has done wonders for our external perception. It really has.
So what happened with the project? How did that
Well, we
turn
do
out?
it every start class now.
Okay.
Every start class. We have, somebody can correct me if you want to, we have a 4 to 6 week program that's a combination of classwork and practicum, in-house practicum. And then we all year long, we're managing relationships with nonprofits looking for capacity building projects. And we take our young recruits and we take a young manager out of the ranks of consulting.
Okay.
And we put them into this setting with a nonprofit organization for 4 to 6 week.
It's a big investment.
It pays off in spades.
Yeah.
It pays off in spades because it helps us demonstrate that we do have a value set, back to your question, that the corporation has a responsibility and we're willing to actually toe that line. And then our employees, they end up, it's kind of sticky. They get attached to those nonprofits. They maintain those relationships over years, and it begins to grow. And they become board members of those organizations, and suddenly, before you know it, it's self-fulfilling.
That's great.
It's been a great story for us.
Very interesting, yeah. As you think about, I want to go back to something you said earlier. You talked about what you were looking for when you hire. And if you'd repeat those characteristics, and then how do you assess them? How does someone demonstrate those characteristics to you?
Well, in a nutshell, we're looking for bright people that know how to problem solve. We're looking for people that understand how to communicate. There needs to be an eagerness to apply that within consulting. And here at the University of Texas, we have a very rigorous interview process where we start with several hundred people.
Because in a way, everybody's looking for those things, right? I mean, maybe not eager to a consultant, but they're looking for bright people. They're looking for people who know how to problem
I think they are. I think we're competing for the best of the best.
Yeah.
Which is why we're at the University of Texas. I mean, you guys speak well. I was surprised. I don't keep up with our rankings, but we're well ranked. And of course, we want the best, which is why we recruit here. Yeah. It really is. I've been all over the country. I've recruited at most top 20 schools, actually. And each one has its own strengths. Each one has its own advantages. The people that we choose to work with from the University of Texas are as well situated, as well prepared to fit into that corporate culture, be it my corporate culture or our client's corporate culture, as well suited as any place I've been in the country. It speaks well for the program and the preparation that goes into the graduates.
Good. I've been told I have time for one more question, so
Make it a good
I
one.
just want to ask you, what's the best advice you were ever given?
I had somebody explain to me one time the telephone game, the thing we were talking about earlier, which is at the top of an organization, you've got a value set. And you can't afford to draw it real wide with lots of gray areas. It needs to be very clear because every time you get one step removed from the declaration of what that value set is, it tends to change and morph. And so remaining vigilant on that culture and those values and what that means to be an executive of that organization is of paramount importance. It's one you can never let down on.
I'm going to turn it over to you now to ask questions. I'm sure there's lots more you'd like to ask. We have 2 microphones here. So feel free to just line up at the microphones. Don't be shy. It always takes a while to get the first person up, and then everybody lines up, and then the last person in line doesn't get to ask their question. So jump right up there, and
How you doing?
we'll start on the left.
Thank you for coming out, Mr. Wilkins.
There we go.
You speak a lot to company culture, and it sounds really wonderful, but I was wondering if you could give us like a specific example of something that you see maybe in the office that really speaks to this company culture.
Yeah, I mean, I've had lots of examples that speak to the culture. One, we're friends. We hang out. And not just, lots of consultants hang out. And usually you hang out when you're on the road and you have nobody else to hang out with, right? You work late, you get done, you go eat, you hang out. We're friends inside and outside of work. It translates, so that's one. It translates to, I think, the way we treat each other. And I've got lots of examples, but I'll give you one. We were talking the other day about a company that had an employee who had a sick relative. And the company was allowing all other employees to donate their vacation time to this employee so that she could be with her sick relative. And one person said, wow, that's really cool they do that. And somebody else that I work with caught it and went, no, that's not. It would be cool if the company just let her take off and be with her loved one, not forcing the employees to donate their own personal vacation. Wrapped up in that is a value system. Wrapped up in that is an acknowledgement of we own this company, we own this culture, and we get to say what it is or isn't. When you see that kind of ownership over the way you treat each other, it makes me proud.
Thank you.
That's a good question.
Hi there, my name's Eric. You mentioned earlier there was a semester you couldn't remember. So what exactly, I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
It sounds so bad when you say it.
Just kidding. No. Earlier in the conversation, you mentioned that as CEO, you don't get to do much consulting anymore. So obviously, there are very different experiences, and they're both enriching, but which do you prefer, consulting or managing?
Well, I loved consulting, and I loved it for a couple of reasons. One, when you walk into a room and there's chaos, there's a lack of direction, there's competing motivations, there's political forces, and you have the ability to speak or draw on the board or use whatever tools are at your disposal, and everybody walks out and they're following that plan. That's a high. It is. As a consultant, that's great. So I look to try to do that as a leader now rather than a consultant. So I don't miss that part. I was a bit of a technology nerd, though. And I do miss my technology sometimes. So I still try to play with that, almost as a hobby.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jonathan Bolton. I got two questions for you today. So the first one is, as a person looking at consulting as a future career and at Sense Corp, you talked about fit a little bit. How do you know from your perspective as an employer if the candidate is a fit for your company? And number two, what kind of car would you get if you could have any car?
I have an ex-wife, and she drives my Tesla. I'd love to have that.
Okay. That's a good choice.
And joking aside, we're looking for people that ask those kinds of questions. Fit is something that is hard to measure, it's hard to quantify, it's more of a qualify. And you're looking for somebody that has that unique set of things that show that they're very bright, that show that they know how to communicate, and show they know how to be excited about being part of whatever it is that's in front of them. That last part's hard to do. It's hard to fake. It's hard to fake excitement. I'm really interested in what you have to say. If you're not, your eyes tend to glaze even while you're saying it, and so it's not a quantitative thing. Cool. And we got a lot of process around it.
A lot of what?
A lot of process. We have a lot of people. I've got a dedicated recruiter here on campus whose job it is to help shuttle people through that process well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Good evening, Mr. Wilkins. I just wanted to ask you how you and your co-founders decided to start the firm, and also what that whole process was like.
That's a great question. So I looked up one day and I had an opportunity in front of me based on some skill sets I had. It was technology related. It was during the internet boom, and I just kind of looked at it and thought, well, I'm a little bashful about this now, but I thought, you know what, I could go consult. I can work half as much, I can make twice as much, and I'll just hang out at the beach the rest of the time. And so I talked some guys into doing it, and all we had to do, quite literally, was not get paid while we went and found work and waited for it to work through the cycle of billing. There was a low barrier to entry because of our timing and the fact that consulting is not a capital-rich endeavor, right? It's not a lot of machinery or equipment you need to have. It's just a computer.
Thank you.
No, thank you.
How's all that beach time been?
I've hung out at the beach in the last 20 years, I think 2 weeks. It just didn't work as I'd planned.
You're too successful.
How you doing, Mr. Wilkins? My name's Andrew.
Keat. You guys can call me Keat.
All right. How you doing, Keat?
Good, man.
My name's Andrew. I currently work at an IT consulting firm that's transitioning to doing management, and it's very chaotic. It's kind of the difficulty where you're going from dealing mainly with technology to have to kind of have these people understand, okay, this is what you need to do. This is how you need to set up your hierarchy. How did your company deal with that chaos? And also, you'd mentioned that you wish you could be doing some of the tech consulting. How is doing management consulting as a whole company kind of affected your own opinion on it?
Well, so management consulting is a tricky term in that it really can encompass so much, such a broad spectrum. And if, let's say, we start to implement a new strategy, or there's an organizational structure that needs to change, or you've got to alter process, either around just people or around manufacturing, or almost everything I just said involves technology. So even though you can say we are a management consulting firm, by definition, unless you're going to leave, and McKinsey does this. McKinsey is pure management consulting, it's pure strategy. They'll come in and they've got some recommendations they'll make, and it's clear, I mean, it's part of the agreement. They make them, other people implement them. Many of us, and since Corp is one of these firms, we not only want to help with recommendations, with the study, but we want to be able to hang out and help make those changes because we feel there's synergy between the two. And so we get a lot of technology because of that.
All right, thank you.
Good afternoon, sir.
Hey.
My name is Javier Martinez.
Uh-huh.
After speaking to a few of your employees, they've made it very clear that there's truly an open door policy from top down. You guys don't just say, you guys actually have an open door policy. What's the biggest advantage that you guys have gotten from that?
Well, so open door policy is, I think it's a two-way street, right? One, you're hoping that people feel connected to the strategy of the firm, the driving of the firm, and what's important to the company at large. The other direction of that, however, is a risk mitigation factor, which is if it's an open door, I'm hoping that people will come to me with concerns. I'm hoping people say, do you know that that's screwing up over there? There's a saying, it's lonely at the top, right? Part of that has to do with the fact that you have to make decisions on your own, but the other is that information doesn't always flow up. So I think as a successful leader, one needs to constantly strive to be in touch with people enough, frequently enough, casually enough, non-threateningly enough, such that that information can flow. Otherwise, things happen, things get out of whack, and you don't know about it. And that's to me, that's the big benefit for me.
Thank you.
And I just like people. I mean, I come from humble background, and so I don't like to hide my office. I actually like for people to come in and sit down and chat.
You were mentioning earlier what you do at the end of your company meetings when you open the floor for questions. I thought they'd be interested in that.
Yeah, so we get together, we try to get together 4 or 5 times a year. We get together for quarterly meetings where all employees are there. And at the end of almost every one of these meetings, we have a section that we call I Heard. And it is the time for anybody to ask any question. And I call it I Heard because half the time it's the rumor mill, right? I heard we're going to open an office in Atlanta. I heard, and it really gives everybody the opportunity to try to clear the decks. And then I always joke, I will answer any question you ask, or it'll be really clear I'm not answering it. Those both happen.
Hi, Keat.
Hey.
Good to see you. I'm Sean Sellers. I just wanted to ask, so you said you kind of were on the industry side before and you hired a lot of consultants and you saw a lot of problems or ways that it could have been done better. What were those kind of inspiring factors that made you want to found Sense Corp, and how has that kind of played into how you try to differ your company and your consultants?
Yeah, so there's a conundrum in consulting in that if you think about it, what every client needs is the ability to change. That's why you hire a consultant. You either need a skill set you don't have or you need help in changing. And that kind of applies to every consulting arrangement. If I say it like that, every consulting engagement is the same. But inevitably what happens is the client wants a particular expertise in technology X or Six Sigma or, right? And so there's a tendency for some consulting firms to what we call back up the bus and unload a bunch of young people that actually don't have the experience that you think you're hiring. That can create frustration on the client's part. That can eat up the budget. Once the budget's gone, you have to ask for more budget. Political winds shift. And so if you're not careful, when you look at it, you've got a consulting engagement that, as you get down the road, spent a lot of money, has a lot of unhappy people, and did not accomplish what it was after. And so that's what we try to attack, which is, okay, how do we bring the right people to bear, such that they actually have enough of the experience necessary to get the job done enough so the political winds don't change, or you can do it within the budget required. As a client, I got to tell you, I'd always turn around and I go, wait a minute, I'm out of money again?
Yeah.
How did that happen? We hadn't even started.
Yeah. Worst company you ever worked with? No, kidding.
No, they're all good. Of course, they're my competitors, so
Hello, Keat. My name is Atiq Ghulam, and I was actually one of the Texas 4000 riders this past summer. So
Oh,
thank you for your
which
support.
route?
Sierra. Yeah.
So you
It's
came
the
through
West
my
Coast.
office? Oh, no, Ozark came through
Yeah,
our office.
Ozarks came through. But my question is,
So which route's better?
definitely Sierra. No offense. I'm sure they had a great time at Sunsport, but I like Sierra. My question is, I know that you guys created a new office or moved into a new office in Austin.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk more about your ideas for expansion in Sunsport in terms of offices around the country.
It's a good question. As a small firm, we didn't have an office for 10 years. So we ran the whole thing virtually, and everybody was traveling all over the place. And we'd get together for quarterly meetings, and we'd get together in hotels around the country. Opening an office takes a lot of capital. By the time you sign the lease, get it decked out with furniture, for any number of people, you're into it for $300,000 or $400,000. And so it's not a decision that a small firm makes lightly. As a result, you tend to be opportunistic, right? Where can I drive business, and when does that business become enough momentum to merit or sustain that type of office? I can tell you, we're always looking at that. It's an ever-moving target. 3 years ago, actually that's not true, how long ago? Two years ago, we didn't have this office, right? It's new. We were in business suites and renting a room, and now we've got 40 people sitting in the office here in town, and it's a function of the business. And let the business drive the need.
Thank you.
Hi, Keith. My name is Anthony.
Hey, Anthony.
My question is that I have a relative that has a business out in China and Taiwan, and he has a little bit of a opposing management style to you. He said that you can't be too buddy-buddy with your employees, or else they won't respect your authority. And I'm wondering your thoughts on that, because it seems like you take more of a buddy-buddy approach. So how do you maintain that level of respect for your authority as the leader, even though you seem to have no problem making friends with your employees?
I think that's a great question. I believe that as you look at how you're going to manage a firm, you philosophically approach it. I don't know that one philosophy is necessarily better than the other, but I think you approach it with what you believe you have strength in. I mentioned it, not tongue in cheek, but I come from a very humble background. It's not my style to, quote, be the powerful one. My style is to lead from consensus, to lead from intellect, to lead from ideas, to lead from excitement. I do a lot of things that I think fall in line with more of a servant leader. I don't want to get all heady about it, but I've said this often, many times. I only get to lead SenseCorp because they let me. You think about that. If they didn't want me to lead it, what would happen? Well, they'd quit. They'd be unhappy. They'd show disenfranchisement. There'd be a number of things. And at some point, I'd have to look up and realize, well, something has to change. We got to do something differently. Now, I could go over and run a different kind of firm with mandates, or I can make sure that I'm leading in a way, that works for my employees. Because sometimes, I'll look around and I go, why can't we just do that? And you realize the answer is because that's not the firm we run. Unfortunately, we do this, right? It goes all the way through every piece of philosophy we have. And give you an example. We need to grow as a firm. We need to grow every year because we need to be able to show career movement for people because we hire at the University of Texas. We hire people that are aggressive. We hire people that don't want to sit around and spend 5 years paying dues, although sometimes it might feel like they do. We hire people that want to be aggressive in their careers and take responsibility. They don't mind the accountability, and they want to move forward. That's the firm we run. Comes with it a certain inherent set of things you got to remember. So yeah, he runs that one. I could have chosen to run that one, I guess. Not my strength.
So you feel running the friendly way has lower turnover a bit?
Our turnover is very low. I don't know this about being friendly. It is being respectful. It is about being respectful. And I think that, more than anything, is what cuts through SenseCorp. Because not every employee wants to hang out with me on the weekend, trust me. They're not all wanting to be my friends.
All right, thank you very much.
It's an insightful question.
Hey, Keat, I'm manager at Nemo. So earlier you mentioned that while you're working with a medical manufacturing company, you hired and worked with consultants. And you kind of touched on it earlier, but which of these aspects that these consultants were doing did you figure that you could do differently or better? And then my second question for you would be, what's your vision for the expansion of SenseCorp?
That's a great question. So the different part, at any given moment as a business person, you try to decide what's my product? What's my product look like? How am I going to distribute it? And what am I going to charge for that, right? So if I can attract the same brilliance as those other firms, put them in positions where they have experience to better solve customers' problems and charge 2/3 the amount, that sounds differentiating. That was pretty much my thought process. Okay? And so there are a certain number of clients that would like that value proposition. There are a number of clients that if you walk in and they want KPMG or they want IBM or they want Accenture, they're dead set on that. There's no amount of value proposition that is going to change their mind from that reputation. So what we're after is a different cut of clients, a clientele that is looking for the same change, progressive in nature, but looking for a bang for the buck that fits into our bailiwick. And it's worked pretty well, although it's a constant battle, right? It's always a game of margins. Are you charging enough? Because my costs go up. They go up every year. Everybody that I work with expects a raise, right? Or computers cost more this year than they did last year. So my costs go up, so you're always having to understand how to appropriately differentiate. And I think the better we get at the differentiation, the better premium you can charge, the better that margin is maintained over time.
Okay, thanks.
I think we got time for one question on each side. So the two of you who are in front get the last questions.
Hi, Keat. I'm Brian. I've heard a lot about the great and unique culture at SenseCorp, but as you expand, how important would you say it is to you to keep this culture at SenseCorp, and how much has culture played a factor in your success?
I think that's a great question. I think culture is the number one aspect responsible for our success. Now, that's a little bit of a misnomer. The people I work with are responsible for the success. The thing that holds us together over time, the thing that binds us together, is that culture. What was the other part of your question? How are we going to expand and how are we going to protect that culture?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that we talk about quite often. It's gratifying to me because I talk about growth a lot. I talk about we need to be able to grow. Let's look for X% this year. And the people I work with will raise their hand and go, okay, but what about the culture? As soon as they ask, you know you're doing something right. And I know we won't lose it. I've seen companies that I've followed quite closely grow to tens of thousands of employees and maintain a culture. So I know it can be done. It's got to be done with vigilance. And we challenge each other quite often to make sure we're not losing track of that. It's on our tongues all the time. Good question.
Thank you very much.
Last question.
Hi, okay. So correct me if I'm wrong, but it said that you were from Big Spring, Texas.
I did
correct?
grow up there, yeah.
Okay, perfect. I'm from San Angelo. And so I just wanted to know.
Just down the street.
Yeah, just true.
We played Jolly football.
Yes, of course. But I just want to know your opinion on how, for a student like me and students like us, like how to approach this large-scale business corporate world. You know, coming from a small town, what is your opinion on, or your advice for us?
That's a good question, because I think that's what was behind my not understanding how I was going to fit correctly.
Yeah.
And I interviewed with a bunch of banks off Wall Street, and they were telling me, not quite the right fit. And I didn't understand that. So what I had to do was really understand the aspects of a job that I was looking for and line that up in my interviewing about what values are you guys playing with? What values are you supporting? How does that fit? Because once that fits there, yeah, you do feel it. And you go, oh, that's what they were talking about. So it's about knowing yourself. It's funny, I have a coach, right? As an executive, you don't get a lot of coaching from the people you work with. And I have a coach, an executive coach. And that's what he always tells me. You can't actually figure that out until you know yourself. So concentrate on yourself.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for your questions. They were good. I'm sorry for those of you we didn't get to. Get up there first next time. But thanks for the answers. It was very interesting. Really
thank you.
appreciate it. You want to take us out?
Sure. Thank you so much for kind of taking the time out of your days today to spend it talking to us students. We're really looking forward to taking kind of the insight from how a company culture can drive business, as well as the fact that one semester in college does not define your success. There was some great sighs in the back when you said that. Well, as a token of our appreciation, and as part of tradition at VIP, we have a Stetson Cowboy hat for you.
Thank you very much. Am I going to have to put this on right now?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome.